Namaskar and a warm welcome to Democracies of the World, the program that brings you the latest news of events affecting the democracies across the globe. In today's edition, our top focus will be on Kazakhstan, where anti-government mass protests have been erupted over rising fuel prices. Over the next half an hour, we'll also talk about the political unrest in Sudan. I'm your host, Bhavna Nair. Let's start the program with our first report from Kazakhstan, where the president has sacked entire cabinet and imposed emergency in the cities hit by unrest. Emergency was declared in some of the places in Kazakhstan following mass anti-government protests triggered by a rise in fuel prices. Kazakh president on Wednesday sacked his cabinet and called for a clampdown in the country's largest city, Almaty, and an oil-rich western region. The president said that he had accepted the resignation of the cabinet led by Prime Minister Askar Mamin. He also ordered the acting cabinet to reinstate price controls on LPG and told it to broaden price controls to petrol, diesel and other socially important consumer goods. On Tuesday, thousands of people took to the streets protesting against the government. Police used tear gas and stun grenades to drive the protesters out of the main square in Almaty. The protest began after the government lifted price controls on liquefied petroleum gas at the start of the year. Moving on, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok announced his resignation on Sunday amid political deadlock and widespread pro-democracy protest. Prior to his resignation, thousands marched against a recent deal he had done to share power with the army, who staged a coup in October. Here's a report.
Chanting power to the people, protesters called for a return to full civilian rule. But military forces again responded with force, leaving 2 people dead. Hamdok's decision to quit leaves the army in full control. In a televised address, Hamdok said the country was at a dangerous turning point that threatens its whole survival. He said he had tried his best to stop the country from sliding towards disaster, but that despite everything that has been done to reach a consensus, it has not happened.
بناء على كل ما ذكرت فإنني قد قررت أن أرد إليكم أمانتكم وأعلن لكم استقالتي من منصب رئيس الوزراء مفسحا المجال لآخر من بنات أو أبناء هذا الوطن المعطاء لاستكمال قيادة وطننا العزيز والعبور به خلال ما تبقى من عمر الانتقال.
His resignation is another blow to Sudan's fragile attempts at a transition to democratic rule after a popular uprising led to the overthrow of Sudan's long-term authoritarian president Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Civilian and military leaders had made an uneasy power-sharing agreement after the army staged a coup on the 25th of October and initially placed Prime Minister Hamdok under house arrest. Under the agreement reached with Hamdok in November, the reinstated Prime Minister was supposed to lead a cabinet of technocrats until fresh elections were held. It was unclear how much power the new civilian government would have, and protesters said they did not trust the military.
انقلاب الخامس والعشرين من أكتوبر قمنا بتوقيع اتفاق إطاري مع المكون العسكري في محاولة لإعادة مسار التحول المدني الديمقراطي وحقن الدماء وإطلاق سراح المعتقلين والمحافظة على ما تحقق من إنجازات في العامين الماضيين والتمسك بالوثيقة الدستورية.
Coup leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has defended last October's coup, saying the army had acted to prevent a civil war. He also said Sudan is still committed to the transition to civilian rule, with elections planned for July 2023.
And now news coming in from South Africa, where a major fire tore through its 138-year-old parliament in Cape Town on Sunday, causing the roof of one building to collapse and gutting the chamber of the National Assembly. However, no casualties were reported in the fire, but the damage to the parliament has shocked the nation. Meanwhile, a person was being questioned by authorities in relation to the fire.
A huge fire ripped through South Africa's Parliament building in Cape Town on Sunday. Its roof caught fire and flames also spread to the National Assembly. According to officials, the fire started on the third floor offices and quickly spread to the National Assembly chamber, the Parliament's lower house. Parliament said some offices had been severely gutted and confirmed significant damage to the new assembly wing of the building, which includes the National Assembly chamber where lawmakers sit. However, the building is home to thousands of treasures including historic books, photographs and important works of art. President Cyril Ramaphosa called it a terrible and devastating event as he vowed Parliament's work would continue. He said the building's sprinkler system had not functioned properly and praised firefighters for responding to the fire in minutes. The House of Parliament in Cape Town are made up of 3 sections, with the oldest dating back to 1884. The newer sections, built in the 1920s and 1980s, house the National Assembly. It was the second fire at the Parliament in under a year. In March, there was a fire caused by an electrical fault.
And now news from Australia's former Parliament building in the capital Canberra was briefly set alight on 30th December by protesters during a demonstration for Aboriginal sovereignty. The fire burned the front doors of the old Parliament House before it was put out. As soon as the fire broke out in the heritage building, people stuck inside were promptly evacuated. The authorities said that no one was injured in the fire. Currently, residents of the building, the Museum of Australian Democracy, had on 20th December shut its door after Indigenous protesters held a peaceful sit-in. Indigenous campaigners have been holding demonstrations in the lead-up to the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy on the former Parliament's front lawns. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has condemned the incident. And in a rare meeting that indicated a renewed effort to resolve tensions, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met Israeli Defense Minister in Israel. Both the leaders discussed security and civil matters. This was the first time Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met an Israeli leader in Israel since 2010. Here's a report.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas paid a rare visit to Israel on 29th December for talks with Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz. This was the latest in a series of meetings between top Israeli officials and Palestinian leaders. In August 2021, the Israel Defense Minister visited the Palestinian Authority's headquarters in the West Bank for talks with Abbas. According to a Palestinian official, the meeting marked the first time Abbas met with an Israeli official in Israel since 2010. The late-night talks took place at Gantz's home in central Israel. An Israeli Defense Minister's statement said the two men discussed security and civil matters. Gantz told Abbas that he intended to continue to promote actions to strengthen confidence in the economic and civilian fields as agreed during their last meeting. Israel's new Prime Minister Naftali Bennett opposes Palestinian independence and has ruled out formal peace talks. But he wants to reduce frictions with the Palestinian Authority and improve living conditions in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Israeli-Palestinian relations have substantially deteriorated in recent years. Several instances of violence have been reported in the West Bank in recent weeks, including a series of Palestinian attacks on Israelis as well as a surge in violence by the Israeli settlers against Palestinian civilians. Peace talks were suspended in 2014 and Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank have since expanded. The Palestinian Authority seeks an independent state that includes all of the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. Israel captured all 3 areas in 1967, though it withdrew from Gaza in 2005.
And a story now where democracy is at stake. In a shocking incident, a fight broke out in the Jordanian parliament recently during a heated debate about constitutional reforms that would afford greater rights to women. According to reports, a brawl took place regarding amendments to the country's constitution, following which MPs were caught punching each other. Amid the heated discussion, one deputy staff member fell to the ground during the brawl, forcing the session to be adjourned. Jordanian women currently enjoy equal rights with respect to their entitlement to health care, education, political participation and employment, but are not afforded the same rights when it comes to nationality and citizenship as men. Jordan's constitution has been amended 29 times since 1952. It's time for break in Democracies of the World. Stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back after the break. You're watching Democracies of the World. Libya's first presidential election was postponed on 24th December. Its parliament has refused to fix a new date, raising fears fresh political instability in the country. Libya has been ravaged by war since erstwhile dictator Muammar Gaddafi was deposed in a NATO-backed uprising in 2011. The election is part of a wider push to end a decade of violence in the country by installing a new president and parliament with national legitimacy. Meanwhile, European countries and the United States have urged Libyan authorities to decide on a final date for elections without delay. Let's take a look at the incidents that forced Libya to postpone a vote seen as crucial to end its 10-year-old long crisis. Here's a report.
Libya was unable to hold its first presidential election as planned last month. It marked a major blow to global efforts to end a decade of chaos in the oil-rich Mediterranean country. Libyans were scheduled to vote on 24 December for a presidential election that was long marred by mounting challenges over rules and regulations. The parliamentary committee overseeing the process said it was impossible to hold elections as originally planned. The failure to hold the vote threatens to open a political vacuum in the North African country. The Electoral Commission has proposed a one-month delay, but the parliament may seek a longer one. The run-up to the poll was marred by disputes over eligibility of candidates and growing fears over security. The divided political class that emerged in the wake of the NATO-backed uprising against former ruler Muammar Gaddafi could not agree on the rules overseeing the election. Furthermore, they failed to reach a consensus on what powers a new president or parliament would have and who could run in the vote. Parliament Speaker and presidential election, Agoulia Saleh, issued a law setting the first round of the presidential election for 24 December, followed by a runoff vote if needed and parliamentary polls. Other political institutions rejected the law, accusing Saleh of passing the law without proper parliamentary process. Without clear agreement on the rules, the Parliament's election committee and the fragmented judiciary were unable to agree on eligible candidates. Most of Libya is controlled by armed forces that back rival candidates. 98 candidates registered for presidential race. Some of them are powerful armed factions. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of former leader Muammar Gaddafi, registered. He faces a 2015 conviction of war crimes during the rebellion that overthrew his father 10 years ago. The Electoral Commission rejected his candidacy, but his lawyer said a court had overturned its decision. Khalifa Haftar, a military commander whose forces waged a destructive 14-month offensive on Tripoli that ended last year, is rejected as a possible president by various armed factions and many in western Libya. Abdul Hamid Deba, the interim prime minister, had promised not to stand for election as a condition to taking on a caretaker role earlier this year. Other candidates say his presence on the ballot is unfair. Libya has been in turmoil since long-serving ruler Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in 2011. Since then, parliamentary elections in 2014, the country is divided between two main rival administrations. One in the east backed by military commander General Khalifa Haftar, mainly backed by Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Russia and France. The other administration in the west is the United Nations recognized Government of National Accord in capital Tripoli, mainly backed by Turkey and Qatar. Turkey and Libya have seen closer ties, especially after the signing of security and maritime boundary pacts in November 2019, along with Turkey's aid to help the legitimate Libyan government push back Haftar's forces. Meanwhile, the UN and Western powers had hoped that the election will bolster efforts to achieve peace and democracy in Libya, a strategically important country that is a major oil producer and a transit point for migrants to Europe. In a joint statement, France, Germany, Italy, UK, and the US have urged war-torn Libya to set a new date for the delayed presidential election quickly.
Story now on Japan's action plan. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said on Saturday that he will refocus his efforts on foreign policy and pledged to take 2022 the year of diplomacy. In a New Year statement posted on his website, Kishida laid strong emphasis on universal ideals, efforts to resolve global issues and protecting the lives of the people. He called them these the three guiding principles of a diplomacy of realism for the new era. Kishida, who took office in October, also promised to prioritize tackling the COVID-19 pandemic as Japan sees a spread of the Omicron variant. He also pledged to continue his efforts to close the wealth gap and create a sustainable economy by creating a new type of capitalism for the country. And now the members of the United Nations Security Council condemned the reported killing of at least 35 people, including 4 children and 2 staff members of the Save the Children in Kayah state of Myanmar on December 25th. The statement issued by the Security Council stressed the need to ensure accountability for this act. The United Nations Security Council members called for immediate halting of all violence and emphasized the importance of respect for human rights and ensuring safety of civilians. They stressed the need for safe and unimpeded humanitarian access to all people in need and for the full protection, safety and security of humanitarian and medical personnel. The members of the Security Council reaffirmed their support for the people of Myanmar and the country's democratic transition. They expressed their strong commitment to the sovereignty, political independence, territorial integrity, and the unity of Myanmar. In a recent marathon session in the United States House of Representatives, 2 Republican lawmakers from Georgia sat in full view of television cameras without wearing a mask. It was the latest act of defiance by the members Taylor Greene and Andrew Clyde against a rule requiring legislators to wear masks on the House floor. Most Republican lawmakers, however, have complied with the mandate that can carry fines that quickly add up to the hefty amounts. Greene and Clyde, however, have repeatedly flouted it. The two are said to have amassed more than around $1 lakh in fines for defying the House mask rules. A resolution approved by the House in January said the members will be fined $500 the first time they fail to wear a mask on the House floor and $2,500 for subsequent violations. And that's all we have in this edition of our program on democracies of the world. Please connect with us on various social media platforms. You can send in your feedback at sansad.tv@sansad.nic.in. We'll bring you more stories of different democracies in our next edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more informative programs on Sansad TV. Till then, goodbye. Namaskar.